at least few minutes. So he has permitted me, and I'm also taking your permission to leave for a few minutes, and I will come back definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you. You are coming back. Friends, we saw that movie about Sri Lanka. But what is happening in Iraq and Syria by ISIS, etc., I mean, is 10 times worse than what we saw. So I think there's a time when the whole international community should take note of that. Now you see, I have Priyadarshi Datta. Priyadarshi? I was looking for you. I am requesting Priyadarshi Datta to come and make a presentation. Priyadarshi Datta is a consultant to the finance minister. He is an activist. But
IMB, Information and Broadcasting, but I would rather not like to mention my government position.
Okay, doesn't matter. But you see, as a matter but Priyadarshi, we know him as a sparkling human rights activist. His presentations are full of knowledge. His presentations are, I mean, in the sense that he brings the essence of the subject, and that is why he is one of our most popular contributions to all these conferences. And I request Priyadarshi Datta to kindly come.
A very good evening, very good morning to you all, Mr. Vaidamurthy, Professor Sushma Yadav, Ganesh Abhimanyu, and all other eminent panelists. I think the most comforting news from Sri Lanka, relatively comforting, comes yesterday, that when Mr. Maithripala Yappa Sirisena has been elected in a very expected, and to somebody it is very surprising as a president. He did almost the impossible, as one of the reports said. Now, as you know, that the Tamil National Alliance had backed Maithripala Sirisena, who till a few days ago was a part of the ruling dispensation, but he broke with the president Mahinda Rajapaksa. And the person who made it possible is one of the person who is quite loved in India, Ranil Wickremesinghe, and I think he has been appointed as the Prime Minister, but I think there will be a separate election for the Parliament. I remember that when Ranil Wickremesinghe in 2003, of course I was not there, but I've read it in the reports. When in 2003, the World Hindu Conference was held in Colombo, Ranil Wickremesinghe addressed it, and he said that the Hindus are the oldest people in Sri Lanka, and they have contributed to the enrichment of our society. Now, when he said Hindus, the word Hindus actually in Sri Lankan context had meant always the Tamils. As you know, the name that Tamils gave to themselves is Hindus. It was only for the political purposes when in 1833, when the state councils were introduced by the British as a part of the Cameroon-Colebrook Treaty arrangement, that the seat became Tamil, and henceforth politically it was Tamil, but wherever the Tamils themselves culturally, they always call themselves Hindu. Therefore you had this Ceylon Hindu Congress. Therefore you have all the schools run by the Tamils, mostly they are called the Hindu schools. You have the Hindu College of Jaffna, and there are so many other, Hindu colleges and Hindu schools. I am told their number is 25, I am still not sure. They are still there in Sri Lanka, earlier known as Ceylon. So I think it still remains to be seen what Mr. Maithripala Sirisena does. Only a few weeks ago he has said that there is no question of removing the army from the trouble-affected area. But I am hopeful that, India had put all his eggs in one basket, and Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa gravitated towards China. And we had been doing this mistake for a very long time. We had been thinking that, Sri Lanka is virtually a mini India. It's almost a part of India. And we have been doing this not from today, but I think right from the time when, Mr. Amaratunga Julius Jayawardene, who later on became president, he came to meet Gandhi at the Ramgarh session of Congress in 1920. And Gandhi asked him that, terrible things are happening in Sri Lanka. At that time, it was not concerning the Tamils of Sri Lanka, but the Indian laborers who used to work there in the tea plantations, and also the Indian traders who had gone there. Now, Julius Jayawardene very cunningly changed the subject, and he said that, in Ceylon, that time it was called Ceylon, till 1972 the country was known as Ceylon. Except for a few, they are seen basically as exploiters. So Gandhiji got carried away. He said, no, we don't want to exploit Sri Lanka. I think even Ceylon, even after we get independence, we can live as best of the brothers. In 1939, when this vengeance against the Indian origin Tamils who were there in the upcountry Tamils we call in Kandy, there was a movement against them. Jawaharlal Nehru was sent to Ceylon at that time as called, for the first time in 1939, and later on he again visited Ceylon. So in 1946, there was a speech given by Nehru in which he still nurtures a view that in future it may be possible for India and Ceylon to live in a sort of a federation. And what happens in 1956, that immediately after in 1948, when Ceylon got independence without any freedom struggle, the first two laws enacted by them were de-recognizing the citizenship of the people who have settled down from the other parts of Indian subcontinent into Ceylon. That was the law brought by the Senanayaka government, who belonged to the United Nationalist Party. Of course, the crescendo began to start in 1952 when they brought out this law of what is called the Swabhasha, which came into known as Sinhala alone. Now that was the time, this Buddhist majoritarianism or Buddhist chauvinism started showing its color. But India still then was caught in a time warp. To them, the greatest problems of the Tamils of Sri Lanka were the problems of Indian Tamils. But that was actually a crisis hiding another crisis. I think India, outside Tamil Nadu, was not even, cognizant of that there are actually Tamils in Sri Lanka. That is my view, till the rise of Prabhakaran. It is only when the crisis began in Sri Lanka, after their constitution came into existence, which said the Buddhist Sasana and Sinhala alone, in 1972, and around in 1976, the conference in the Jaffna Peninsula takes place where it said that Tamils are a separate nation. And by 77, the first sparks of the civil war began. And then by the turn of the 81, when the Jaffna library was burned down, it has assumed a critical mass. Then suddenly Indians realized, there were Tamils in Sri Lanka also. Initially we had thought, that in Sri Lanka it is all Sinhala. But, I think you can listen to me even without this mic. But if you see the map of, the very shape of Sri Lanka is deceptive. When you see it on a map, you think it is one country. It is all symmetrical. But in the world, Sri Lanka is not the only island which harbors more than one sovereign state. For example, you have the state of Papua and the New Guinea, which has this part of Malaysia, which is earlier known as Irian Jaya. You also have other countries, for example, in the Caribbean state, where you have Haiti and I think this Dominican Republic sharing one island. So it does not mean if a geographical unit has to be a one country. No, unfortunately in India, as I had described in my last year's speech, there is what is called darkness below the land. Sri Lanka is our country of close geographical proximity. I think the Indian climatic and the geographical conditions extend into Sri Lanka. Karl Marx had described Sri Lanka as the Sicily of India. But it is ironical that we virtually know nothing about that country. If you say to a common Indian, outside Tamil Nadu of course, about Sri Lanka, he would say about Ramayan, then probably he knows something about, Samrat Ashoka's son, or alternatively saying he was his brother Mahinda going to Sri Lanka. Then there is a gap of around 2,000 years. Then we come to, say when we say Jayadi, Jayavardhani. That speaks of our knowledge about Sri Lanka. But if you ask an Israeli about his knowledge of Lebanon, about his knowledge of Syria, about his knowledge of Egypt, it is par excellence. That shows how we conducted our foreign affairs. Now, but today time is short. I think all these years, for the last 6-7 years, I have been speaking about the human rights of the Tamils of Sri Lanka. Now, but I think I would rather like to rephrase it, the rights of the Hindus of Sri Lanka. Why Hindus? Because if you see in the 19th century, in 1897, Swami Vivekananda, while returning from America through Europe, he landed first in Colombo. He was there for 10 days in Ceylon. Under what name the Tamils of Ceylon had invited Swami Vivekananda? They said it is we Hindus of Ceylon. Now many people who are associated with even Ramakrishna Mission, they actually do not know that who are the Hindus of Ceylon. They are actually the Tamils of Sri Lanka. And at that time, the elder brother of Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan, his name was Kumaraswamy Ponnambalam. He while welcoming Swami Vivekananda, said that through your work, you have put humanity a debt difficult to repay and shed fresh lustre on our motherland. Now, I wanted to know what P. Kumaraswamy was meaning by motherland. Was it Sri Lanka, where he was born and lived, or it was India? I think he probably meant it India. Henceforth, according to what my study shows, the Tamils of Sri Lanka, although Sri Lanka has never been a part of India as against common assumption, Ceylon, right from 1803, was an independent colony with their own military, with their own judiciary system, with their own civil service. They consider themselves as an Indian. Therefore, I think they call themselves as spiritually Indian. If you say to a Tamil of Sri Lanka that you are an Indian, he would not mind. Once I was in touch with a person who from London, a Sri Lankan Tamil, used to run a blog. So I wanted to know that, what is your nationality? He said, you said it, I am a spiritually Indian. You had this example of Kasibasi Senthil Iyer from Jaffna, who spent 14 years in Varanasi. You had the example of Kumaraswamy, who used to say that I am more Indian than Indian. And he used to, whenever he used to come, he hardly ever stayed in Madras Presidency. He used to stay with the Tagore family in Calcutta. He had written about Rajasthani painting. He had written about the Himachali painting. Also, you had the other example of Mailabahan of Swami Vipulananda, the architect of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda movement in Sri Lanka. He was the person who was he was a professor at the Annamalai University when it was started in the late 1937. And when, a British inspector came to inspect that Annamalai University, he went up into the roof and hoisted the Indian flag. At that time, it was the Congress tricolor flag, this Charkha flag, which was said to be Indian flag. So you had this example of Tamils considering themselves as spiritually as Indian. But it is we thought, in North India and other parts, it is a Tamil problem. It is only for the Tamil Nadu people to look after it. And also in Tamil Nadu, the twist of the politics was such, one particular party, namely the DMK, now quite marginalized, it hijacked that platform and said, yes, Tamil is actually our problem. It is actually a part of the Dravidian movement, which it was never. We do not know if probably, the AIDMK chief, Mr. Ramachandran, had been alive. He died in 1987 and actually had returned from a cardiac surgery in America. And he was coming to New Delhi at the time to say that IPKF should not be sent to Sri Lanka. But then he passed away. We do not know, had he been MGR been alive, probably we would have seen a different way. Prabhakaran was not in the side of, choosing sides in Tamil Nadu politics. But at that time, his was friend Mukundan or Shiva, that is, I'm forgetting his name. He close to Karunanidhi. So I think it so happened that both for the supporters and the critics of the Tamil nationalism in Sri Lanka, it became a Tamil problem. But I say it is basically a Hindu problem. We say it's a Hindu problem whenever there is a clash. In Muslim countries, probably, when Pakistan Hindus suffer, we consider it as a Hindu problem. When in Bangladesh, we have a session after this on Bangladesh, and I'm going to moderate it, where maximum number of Hindus live anywhere outside India, we understand a Hindu problem. But when in Sri Lanka it happens, we say, no, it's a Tamil problem, as if Theravada Buddhists have been very close to the Hindus. Such is our feeling. But if you read the writings of the Walpola Rahula, who was probably the first Buddhist scholar from the entire Indian subcontinent or entire Asia to teach in Sorbonne University of Paris. Now, if you read his book called the History of Sri Lanka, another is Legacy of the Heritage of the Bhikshus, others. Now, I'm surprised to find it is in no way very different from the jihad. He says that the Dravidas or the Tamils who came from the outside, according to the sacred laws, Tamils have no right to rule on Sri Lanka, and it is only the king of Sri Lanka should always be a Buddhist person. Now, we have heard about promised land, but Walpola Rahula was giving a promised island. There is a word called the Tena Dhammadeep. Gautam Buddha said it is Dhammadeep. Let everybody be a lamp of Dhamma. That word was twisted by the Theravadin to say that Sri Lanka is the Dhammadeep. It is the island of a Dhamma. From deep DIP it became DWIP. And now all those things were done with the collusion of the ruling Sinhala, the Sinhala authorities. So when I'm just coming to the end of my speech. When India got independence in 1947, although when the Indian National Congress was started in 1885, Madras Presidency was the only presidency which sent representatives from every district. And the third Indian National Congress was held in Madras itself. But when the independence came at that time, the nationalist feeling, I'm sorry to say, had somewhat been overtaken by the Dravidian movement. So there was a plan for a Dravida Nadu when India got independence by the Tamils here. So, but that after the Chinese war, it all subsided. So even some of the Tamils in India who believed of a separate Dravida Nadu, who were secessionists, they became conformists. But in Sri Lanka, the exact opposite happened. When Sri Lanka got independence, Tamil wanted to live as part of a one country. Tamils never had viewed themselves as a minority. They used to view themselves as one of the two co-founding races of Sri Lanka. Tamils of Sri Lanka were conformists, who from conformists being turned into secessionists. Now why it happened? It was not due to their own fault. They had wanted to live as a part of one country alone. But legislations and the government policy of colonizing their land, from 1951 we see 1956 the Federation Party coming in, which said about there should be a federal system in Sri Lanka. And till slowly 1977, when you have an election, and that election the election was not fought by LTT. It was the TULF, which was an umbrella party of all Tamil organizations. And Shelva Nayak, who is said to be the father of modern Tamil nationalism, he was the person who presided over it, and in 1977, the majority of the Tamils wanted a separate Tamil Elam. Now this word Tamil Elam, now Elam is a very ancient word in Tamil, it means island. But the word Tamil Elam was not invented by Prabhakaran. It was there even before 30 years he was born. In 1923, Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam, one of the makers of the modern Sri Lanka, the maker of the Colombo University, he was a part of the Ceylon Congress, and when he saw this domineering attitude in the 1922, he broke. Even his elder brother remained there, Ponnambalam Ramanathan, but he came out and he founded the All Ceylon Tamil League, and there he said that although we have done more for this entire nation of Sri Lanka, yet we want to say that we don't want to lose our identity. We don't want to be neither fish nor flesh nor fowl. We are justly proud of our heritage, which we call Tamil Elam. That was in 1923. Unfortunately, Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam did not live. He passed away in 1924 while on a pilgrimage to Madurai. 6 years later, his brother, who was one of the great proponents of composite Ceylon nationalism, also realized his mistake when the Donoughmore Commission was announced. But that was too late. He was virtually towards the end of his life, and he did nothing at that time. So it is, that is what I say, that I think we better realize that there are fault lines in Sri Lanka, and we have to look forward what this new government does. As of today, I cannot see in a near future that, the demand for separate Tamil Elam being raised there. But our priority would be to see that justice is being done for this horrible massacres. This farce of a reconciliation and lesson learned committee should be thrown out. And the international committee, and especially India, which we feel that Tamils there are our brothers. They are also spiritual Indians. They should go, but they should go and bring to justice, including Mahinda Rajapaksa, who is responsible for this horrible butchery, and even Sanath Fonseca, who was at that time the army chief, turned against him. Now, but in 1971, after the Bangladesh war took place, India had this history of betraying their people. In 1971, after the war ended in 1972, I have seen those parliamentary debates, whereas some people wanted to know whether there should be a tribunal like that of Nuremberg and Tokyo after the Second World War. But the Indian government said, no, it is an issue of Bangladesh themselves, we cannot intervene. So as a result, what happened, that Tiger Niazi continued to live till 2002. The butcher of Pakistan, he continued to live in peace in Rawalpindi till 2002. And there were 33 million people who died, and according to Gary S. Bass's latest book called The Blood Telegram, it is 1 crore people. 1 crore people, he said, died in the massacre of the East Pakistan, and most of them, 90% were them Hindus. Even if you say 30 lakh, it is a great figure. So we have this history of turning blind eye towards what's happening in the neighborhood. And they look towards us because they consider themselves spiritual Indian. India is not that what we call India, we say Mother India. Even in Sri Lanka, if you go, they still say Mother India. This word Mother India is very popular among the Sri Lankan Tamil. So India is the India of our constitution, which says India is that India is a union of state. Now, but there is another view of India, that India is Mother India, and the Tamils of Sri Lanka are actually, in the spiritual sense, the sons and daughters of Mother India. But the question is, with the new government coming in power in New Delhi as well as in Colombo, what are we going to do for those spiritual Indians, the sons and daughters of the Mother India? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priyadarshi. Priyadarshi Datta. You see, I wish we had more time for him, and you see, we'll have the occasion to listen to him also on the Bangladesh issue. Before I go further, as you know that we are extremely very tightly placed as far as our time is concerned. there are certain parallel sessions also going on. There is one session which is going in the conference room, that is room number 4, and that is about the Romas, the lost children of India. Romas is coming as the descendants of Rama. It is becoming Romas, which were otherwise known as gypsies. Gypsies. There is some session that going on. Those who may be interested may go to that place also, room number 4. Now you see, 7:30. I have been telling Rajesh that I have to go for at least few minutes. So he has permitted me, and I am also taking your permission to leave for a few minutes, and I will come back definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you. You are coming back. Friends, we saw that movie about Sri Lanka. But what is happening in Iraq and Syria by ISIS, etc., is